I would like to invite Mr. Kishore Babu, Deputy Director General, Ministry of Communications, and the key architect behind conceptualizing this webinar series, to give us an overall context of this webinar series. Mr. Kishore Babu is a Deputy Director General, Ministry of Communications, and a firm believer in the competencies of Indian innovation systems and entrepreneurial abilities of startups and SMEs in cutting-edge technologies. He continuously engages with the Indian digital innovation systems and SMEs in the domains of standardization, R&D, innovation to drive the policy objectives. He currently represents ITU in ITU from Asia Pacific region as the Vice Chair of the Telecommunications Development Advisory Group from the Asia Pacific region and the Vice Chair Council Working Group CWG Internet at ITU. Mr. Babu, over to you for your remarks, please. Shefali, can we have Mr. Babu's presentation, please? Yeah, thank you. Mr. Babu, I think you're not audible.
Ma'am, we can't hear him.
Okay. Mr. Babu, we cannot hear you.
How far away are you, Mr. Shakya, from Kishore Babu's room?
Ma'am, actually, Mr. Babu, I think has joined the webinar from his.
I'll make a visit to it.
Oh, okay. I'm so sorry. I thought we could invite him over to Mr. Shakya's room in that case. Sorry.
Sir, if you can remove your microphone plugin and
Asif, have we muted Mr. Babu? Can you unmute him from the tool?
he is unmuted already, ma'am. Sorry.
Babu, you are
Now he is self-muted. Can
Yes.
he talk?
Yeah. Thank you very much. I'm really sorry. It was system-wise muted centrally. Very good morning to all the distinguished members, and thank you very much for this opportunity to take forward this webinar series. I fully appreciate and thank all the distinguished members who spoke earlier from the administration as well as from the ITU regional office. As you are all aware, can you go to the next slide, please? As we are all aware, India has a large ecosystem of IT and IT-enabled services with globally demonstrated competencies. There are many committed Indian global companies delivering these digital services across the borders, and adding strength and innovation to these IT services ecosystem. There's a large startup and academia ecosystem to enable WSIS objectives and SDG goals in line with IT strategic plan. And it has been my opportunity, to work closely with this innovation process. And personally, I have learned a lot in facilitating for common good. You can see in the slide, there are many key innovation players from India to support global digital objectives. And public-private partnership is the key driver for the Digital India program, and especially National Broadband Mission, which Madam Anita Praveen and senior leadership is driving from Department of Telecom. And India recognizes the importance of affordability, as mentioned by previous speakers, technology development, and importantly, stakeholder participation as key drivers for adoption of digital services to address various socio-economic challenges. As part of ITU TDAC, I have the opportunity to work on private sector participation and innovation promotion. And we recognize the importance of leadership from the administrations in the region and as well as IT regional office for their continuous effort to deliver the digital fruits to masses with the support of huge academia ecosystem, startup ecosystem, and many more deep tech companies working to promote these innovative processes. Next slide, please. Thank you. And the webinar series objective is to share success stories of ICT projects and key technology principles underlying to promote ICT development in the region as a family, to promote Indian philosophy of Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, that world is one family. And we are available to support on technology collaboration and hand-holding to achieve similar outcomes in partnership with ITU and with support from industry and other stakeholders. I thank Madam Okuda and her team for sowing the very seed of webinar series in sometime in September, telephonic talk with Madam Okuda in 2020, and Madam Anita Praveen and Mr. Shakya to support this engagement to take forward this webinar series. And most importantly, Mr. N.G. Subramaniam and TSDSI team for their extraordinary effort. And of course, I have to really specifically mention all the key stakeholders, including Ms. Bindu, who has been driving and coordinating with all the key speakers. Our objective is to bring experts who are, who have really led these mega successful projects, so that we share from the people who contributed for the success of these stories for this benefit of this membership. And we are available to continuously engage and support in the days and months to come. And thank you very much, one and all. And we look forward to take your feedback as part of these sessions so that we can improve and contribute for the qualitative sharing of these success stories and key barriers as well as key enablers, what made this success possible from the management as well as from the TSDSI. Thank you very much. And over to Bindu for beginning of this session. And I wish all of us all the best. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Babu, for giving that context of the genesis of this webinar series and what is to come in the series. I now invite Dr. Vivek Raghavan, Chief Product Manager, Unique Identification Authority of India, UIDAI, to deliver a talk on the India stack from the technology architecture perspective. Dr. Raghavan is the Chief Product Manager and Biometric Architect at UIDAI. He has been responsible for the design, implementation, and scale out of the technology platform for Aadhaar, the world's largest identity program, mostly as a volunteer. Currently leading the rollout of many AI initiatives at Aadhaar in the areas of biometrics and document validation. He has also been working to develop open data sets and open source models for translation and speech recognition in Indian languages. Over to you, Dr. Raghavan.
Yeah, thank you, Bindu, for your introduction, and also thank you to Mr. Kishore Babu, who has helped to conceptualize this webinar series, as well as all of the distinguished speakers in the inaugural session, including those from TDSI, as well as Department of Telecommunication and ITU. So thank you very much for giving me the opportunity. Let me now see if I can share my screen. Before that, let me just see if I can. So today I am going to be talking about.
Dr. Raghavan, would you like to share your screen, or we have your presentation?
I would like to share my screen, yes.
All right.
Sure, sir.
Yeah, I would like to share my screen if possible.
Yes, sir.
Okay. So give me a second here, sorry. Okay, so today I am going to be talking about India Stack, and India Stack is actually a group, is actually a set of digital infrastructure that that has kind of organically developed over the years, and it basically has led to lots of changes in the way Indians access digital services. And I hope to explain basically what is India Stack, how does it work, and what has the impact of India Stack been on India, and as well as the architectural principles that were used in the development of the various components of India Stack. So I think that I'd start with a little bit of a history. Back in 2008, we had basically about, back in 2008, India used to spend about $50 billion in direct subsidies, as well as, diversion and leakage was quite common at that time. Only 17% of Indians actually had bank accounts at that time. Financial exclusion was quite common in India. At the same time, for the poor, getting a loan was almost impossible. That's because there was issues of no credible data, as well as sales cost and servicing cost for small ticket loans. And so therefore, actually customers with the lowest default rates would have the highest interest rates. The same goes for access to banking and investments and things like that. The commission basically the point about it is that if you have a 0.5% commission and the cost of KYC to actually provide a service to someone means that the ticket size of an investment needs to be large enough. As a result, a vast majority of the people of India were actually kept out of these kinds of services. And then, of course, at the same time, there was also lack of access by which people can actually verify their skilling and portability of job content. So therefore, we actually had, because of this lack of portability, you have a low trust system, and therefore people were not able to actually get the skilling benefit. So this is just a kind of, there are many, many other domains where these kinds of things are happening, just examples of where things were. But in the past decade, India has taken a nonlinear path to addressing these issues. Okay. India now today runs the world's largest direct cash transfer program. Over $32 billion are now sent directly to the bank accounts of the beneficiaries, and is actually being in 430 different schemes, and 647 million unique Aadhaar holders have linked their bank accounts and are eligible. Not that not all of them receive, but 647 million people have linked their bank accounts to Aadhaar. So normally, so this is talking about there is this graph actually shows the typical path of between the linkage between the GDP of a country and the percentage of people, with a bank account. So in about 2011, India had about was kind of on this path with about 20% of people having bank accounts. And so given that it should have taken India 46 years to reach at a place where 80% of the people have bank accounts. But instead, India actually achieved this within a period of 6 years to actually get where 80% of all people have access to bank accounts. And this is really, this is a nonlinear change took place in this case. And this acceleration was actually due to three things. Firstly, obviously, it is due to the political will. And I think that because the world's largest financial inclusion and digital India program was driven by the Prime Minister. The second thing, of course, is the proactive government and regulators. And there was a bunch of innovation-friendly regulations and government departments supporting the market making. But the third part is that India's digital infra. And I think that a set of foundational public digital infrastructure services were created as a result of this. Now, this is really what I'm going to talk about. These foundational public digital infrastructure services is what I'm going to talk about in the talk moving forward. And open digital infrastructure actually means to actually build decentralized, interoperable building blocks, which actually can come together and unleash inclusive investment. So decentralized and interoperable are the key words herein. So the old way of actually creating building systems was to build end-to-end solutions. But in the digital world, we have the methods of innovation are actually through open protocols and open platforms. And that's really the big change that allows things to happen in a nonlinear and fast way. So if you look at the way India's public digital infrastructure is, it actually contains three layers in there. At the bottommost foundational layer is actually what we call as the identity infrastructure, which enables people to become part of the digital economy. And then once they can become part of that, they transact. They basically do transactions in this economy, and that's the transaction infrastructure. And the third one is that when they transact, they actually create data, and this data can actually be used for actually providing them more services and more services. And that part is the empower part. So we see that the digital infrastructure falls into these three categories. So Aadhaar is actually the base, is the identity infrastructure. The thing about Aadhaar is that we have now Aadhaar is a very, very minimal. Most important thing, it's a foundational thing, means it is based on the biometrics of the individual. It is minimal. It collects very minimal amount of demographic information. It is unique, and it is for lifetime. And these are really the principles of what an identity system needs to be. And India basically was able to issue 1 billion digital identities in less than 5.5 years. And then, of course, these identities, once issues, allows people to actually assert their identity through basically the authentication and the electronic KYC APIs. The authentication API eliminates physical presence and answers the question, are you who you claim to be? And this is obviously something, and this can be done anytime, anywhere. And similarly, the electronic KYC basically actually eliminates paper-based KYC and is piggybacks on top of the authentication, and basically allows us to eliminate the scourge of fake documents, and also can be done anytime, anywhere. So this identity infrastructure, Aadhaar, authentication, and eKYC, was started in 2010. And as of today, we have basically 1.3 billion Aadhaar identities have been issued. We have 647 million Aadhaar-enabled bank accounts that have been created. There are 58 billion Aadhaar authentications that have taken place, and 9 billion eKYC transactions that have taken place. So you see that this is a system which is a massive system which goes, which runs through the depth, the height and depth of the country, and that's something that that's the core of the public digital infrastructure that we are talking about. Now, Aadhaar adoption really has now one of the things that was talked about basically helping marginalized groups and things like that. So some of the stats that have shown that obviously the number of people with bank accounts has increased significantly, but in addition to that, not only did the numbers increase, the gaps in marginalized groups, okay, the gender gap has been reduced, the employment gap has been reduced, the education gap has been reduced. So therefore, this is actually not only in terms of numbers created a massive numbers, but also it has actually benefited the sectors of society where the need for these kinds of services was maximum. Now, based on top of Aadhaar, a number of different other components of India Stack have been created. The first one is eSign, which is actually an open protocol for digital signature. And this basically what people can actually do is that people can actually now sign electronically, digitally sign their documents based on their Aadhaar number or PAN number. And this is something that allows you to a very large number of people can actually access and digitally sign their documents, which basically creates a non-repudiable document documentation of different kinds. This is one of the key things, key innovations that forms part of India Stack. Of course, one of the biggest successes of the India Stack has been what is known as the Unified Payment Interface. And this is actually a universal payment system that has been created where you can have basically any stored value can be transacted on any app, on any device, and in any, it's an open protocol for basically instant money movement from one bank to the other. The key thing about UPI is it's universally operable. So anybody in any bank account can, and any app can actually move to another, can move money to the other bank account, to the other app. And of course, there is one of the core things we created was a virtual addressing layer, where you actually don't need to disclose account information, but you can indeed have an alias for the account, and that allows you to do portability as well as enhancing privacy. It also supports push and pull payments, and also allows it's a mobile first system, and allows two-factor authentication for security purposes. If you see that that UPI transactions have skyrocketed past credit and debit card transactions in India, and it is and the trend is even further. I mean, this is still numbers from early 2020. The numbers are actually, the UPI numbers are significantly higher than what what is even there. The month-over-month growths are typically in the 20% range. So therefore, if you look at it, this transaction infrastructure is really, again, which is the next layer, which is the engagement layer. Now, we talked about UPI is obviously one of the big things where person-to-person transactions take place. There is also the direct benefit transfers, which basically $32.4 billion of money is actually given by is sent by the government to the individual accounts of the citizens of the country. In addition to that, there have been 200 million micro ATM transactions, which is a mechanism by which people in rural areas can get access to cash without the presence of an actual ATM. And of course, in addition to that, one of the biggest things is that we basically have 1 billion e-invoices in the GST system. So one of the other big infrastructures which was created in India in the last 10 years is actually the implementation of a nationwide goods and services tax, where and I think that from a perspective of the data that is collected, this is one of the most fascinating systems that is there in the country. In addition, other components of basically this India Stack, one is basically a digital locker. And this is actually an open protocol, defined as an open protocol for distributed credential sharing. So therefore, the issuers of the document, digitally sign their documents and place it in the DigiLocker. And the users of so the people who want to request this document can actually access this document online if the individual users can provide access. And creation of this kind of thing can move far in removing physical papers and eliminating fake documents as far as possible. And the intent is to move more and more documents to become machine readable, digitally signed and digitally protected. And there are basically about 2.3 billion documents that have been issued within DigiLocker. And of course, the creation of all of these platforms is really created a wealth of private as well as public data. And I think that the point about all of these data, whether it is social data, commerce data, payment data, digital identity data, all of this data actually can be leveraged to actually provide benefits and additional services to the citizens of the country. And that is something that we see as the next layer of this world. And while I think that, so therefore India, while data privacy is something which is very, very important and must be considered, India is saying that data empowerment and protection. So therefore, the right of the individual to get benefits through the using of their own data is something which is important, and that's enshrined in what is known as the data empowerment and protection architecture. And India is actually implementing DEPA through multiple domains as interoperable protocols, digital infrastructures, and using basically the concept of an electronic consent manager to define these flows. So specifically in the financial area, there is the concept of an account aggregator has been. An account aggregator is actually a financial data access fiduciary who basically is acting on behalf of the user to provide consent. So data can only move from the financial information. So therefore, the request comes from the financial information user. It goes to this the access fiduciary, who's actually the account aggregator, and who then talks to the resident who consents to share their data. And then once the data, this request goes to the provider, there actually happens to be an end-to-end encrypted flow, which is based on top of the consent. And the consent itself is actually can be controlled in terms of how long the consent exists for, what is the purpose of the consent. All of those things are kind of defined in the consent artifact. And the consent moves separately from the data. So actually creation of this kind of consented data flows in using the account aggregator scheme is something that is beginning to get momentum in India as well. Now the similar kinds of things, this exactly the same pattern that we were seeing in the case of the financial systems is also something that is becoming part of the health systems. In fact, the National Digital Health Mission, which has been announced this year, actually is talking about a similar concept of basically movement of data between health information users and health information providers, while respecting the privacy and the control of the resident themselves through the concept of basically the health data fusion. So this is basically, when you say PHR, it is a personal health record network, which is actually something which has been designed as part using this data empowerment architecture is something that's. So India has been actually quite forward thinking in a number of these different areas of basically allowing people to access their data and empowering themselves through the data that they generate. So already, we see that as far as the data infrastructure is concerned, we have 3 billion machine verifiable documents. We have 400 plus fintech startups who are attempting to provide various kinds of services based upon this the account aggregator thing and the DEPA architecture. And we have 15 million digital locker users. But I think of this data architecture, we are still at a very early stage. And we believe that there is a scope of lots of new innovation based on this empowerment layer, where basically where this data is actually can be used to actually provide beneficial services to the citizens of the country. So after that, after that, I'm just going to talk a little bit about, and I have been involved reasonably closely in building some of these digital infrastructures. And through the years, there are certain principles that we have kind of understood. So I'll quickly go over that. So the first thing is, of course, is build platforms. That's the most important thing. You should not build something which is not a platform. And I think that's something that's very important, so that many applications can actually use the platform. So therefore, now the platform should also be built, based upon common standards, certain common standards. But creating a platform that various people can use from day one actually allows you to allow both the best combination of regulating the parts that need to be regulated, as well as allowing the market to innovate in parts where innovation is possible. The second part is that massively complex systems cannot be designed and built as a monolith. The key is that you have to break it down into smaller and smaller pieces. They have to be unbundled and broken down into components, and these into many atomic pieces. And each of the atomic pieces must created and made available so that people can actually innovate around them. Of course, I think I mean open standards is something that is key. That and we are really believe that nation scale systems not only should use open standards but also should use open source and something. So we see that they heavily, all these systems that India has built over the last decade have pretty much been dominant in as far as open source is concerned. Again, we think that it should not be tied to any kind of proprietary or infrastructure. They should work on kind of commodity and heterogeneous computing, and that's something that we've always designed our systems to actually not be dependent on any specific infrastructures. And of course, I think the quality of the APIs, how well the APIs are specified, and that's something that's the most important thing, to make sure that you must be API driven, and the quality of APIs and the APIs must be heavily automated and to ensure evolvability. Privacy and security must be there by design. And I think it can't be an afterthought. It must be from the very beginning. And in each one of these systems, that's one of the key things, that from day one, we must make sure that everything is minimal, and that there is a security, that the privacy and security are first-class citizens of the design of these systems. And I think that when you create these systems that talk to each other, you have to build, you have to establish trust between these various systems through using and trusts in data through using audits, using registries, including digital signatures and attestations of cryptographic attestations of different kinds. And I think that all digital signature and of all API inputs and outputs should ensure that everything is actually traceable, even within systems. I think that scalability always comes from design. So therefore, when you talk to the design of any new system, scalability is inherent in that. Observability is also something which is now clearly fundamental in any large-scale system. If you don't build it with observability at every layer, then you will never understand what is the problems that are happening. But having said that, basically every system, I mean, has failures in scale, and you have to focus on failure resilience in every service and component across the system. No, it's the same way. I mean, I think that the way we see as that there is one internet and many applications, we also see that there is one India stack and many innovative and inclusive solutions for India. And I think that India is similarly building digital infrastructure across various domains, of course, with Aadhaar, the Jam Trinity basically at the base, and at this level you have the health stack, the education stack, the bill payment system, the electronic toll collection, and the GST. And these are various things that India is doing in creating digital infrastructure across domains with the individuals and small business at the center. And thus basically accelerating the movement of India from an informal economy to a formal economy, and giving these various benefits, basically reducing friction, which is reducing the cost of doing business and expanding the number of people who can access particular things. The creating a higher trust society where people can actually have digital and portable attestations and verifiable claims. Because we have these systems, it is easier to identify compliance through automation. And as far as the individuals are concerned, they have access to learning, access to healthcare, and access to products and services. So, and I think that one of the things that I think, and the approach that India has taken as far as India Stack is concerned, And I think that the way that India has built digital public infrastructure is something which people the world over are actually taking note of, and it is actually something that a number of countries are seeing some of the things that India has done, the various pieces India has put together in creating public digital infrastructure has been recognized the world over. And so that is actually the end of my presentation, and I will at this time I'll hold it back for any questions that may be there.
Thank you, Dr. Raghavan, for that very interesting presentation, and also enumerating the principles followed while designing the India stack. I'm sure the technologists as well as the user community, some of these principles would resonate very, very effectively with us. I would now request my colleague Calvin to just check if we have any questions from the audience for Dr. Raghavan.
For the moment, the only question in the chat is whether the presentation could be shared afterwards.
So I think that I may have to do a slight review on that, but after some review, the presentation can probably be shared. So yes, not identically, but almost identically.
Okay. Thank you.
There's another question in the chat now about how can educational institutes participate in this initiative?
So now when you're talking about educational, so I think one of the things that, and today we are talking about India Stack, I think that while, many of the things that actually India Stack has been built upon is actually built on the work of many volunteers. So I think among the other various hats I wear, I'm also a volunteer for what is known as the iSpirit Foundation, which has been one of the driving forces as far as enabling India Stack is concerned. While if you look at it, the actual programs, all the programs of India Stack are actually owned by Government of India, and there are programs running. But there is this entity called iSpirit, where there are volunteers who actually help to define many of these standards, help to actually catalyze many of these standards, and actually work interactively with the government to try and make these things into a reality. So therefore, it is actually, and anybody can actually come and become a contributor. It's only that you have to be willing to spend your time, and it's a voluntary activity. But there are today there are hundreds of volunteers that iSpirit has who actually help define APIs, help standardize, help evangelize to the ecosystem. Think about something like UPI. All the banks had to be brought on board. All the number of and I think these kinds of things, that there are basically volunteers who actually take this vision and took it out there. So therefore, and that's something that anybody who wants to be a volunteer for iSpirit, certainly that's one way, and it's a very unique way that you have the ability to actually contribute to national public digital infrastructure on a volunteer basis, and this is something that people can do.
Okay, I will take the liberty of asking a question. Dr. Raghavan, could you tell us something about the support for the Indian languages or the local languages work that UIDAI is looking at as of now? Are there any plans or strategy for that?
Okay, so that is not necessarily the topic of my discussion today, but I think, and this is not a UID initiative, but we are working on basically building language technology-based AIs, and we are actually collaborating with the Ministry of IT to actually build things like speech recognition in a number of Indian languages, including not just the major languages, but going through, because India is a country of language of And similarly, we are doing things in basically translation between Indian languages. And the intent is for us that language being something very fundamental and emotional to the people, we want this to be something that we want to create an open movement where all people can actually help contribute to their languages. And I think from an AI perspective, what we really want to be is we want to have all the tools that are there in English equivalents in Indian languages for AI is our goal. Now that is, though it's not directly related to this one, but it is something that we are working on.
Okay. Thank you. Calvin, can we have more questions?
Yes, we've had a few questions come in now, and maybe I should do them in groups of 2. So the first 2 questions, the first one is the ATL program a part of India Stack? And the second question is, how are you associating India Stack with the Smart City mission?
What was the first question?
The ATL program a part of India Stack?
ATL. So firstly, India Stack is actually a very loose definition. It is really anything that is a public digital infrastructure, which is in India gets kind of what do you call that? Can become part of India Stack. So I'm not specifically. It's not India Stack is not static in what it is, but I don't know specifically what you're talking about with respect to ATL. Now in Smart City, there are the Smart Cities projects are certainly some things that where there are components where India Stack can get involved in, but direct as today as India Stack is understood, the Smart Cities. While we have collaborated with the Smart City people in some of the things, it's not directly part. It's not directly part of India Stack. If that's your question.
So there was a clarification. Thank you very much, Dr. Vivek. There was a clarification that ATL was regarding Atal Tinkering Lab.
Oh, Atal Tinkering Lab. Okay. Yeah. So okay. So Atal Tinkering Lab, of course, is a very excellent initiative to actually get kids to start doing interesting things and building things. The Tinkering Lab. We certainly see that many of the people who are today volunteers of iSpirit are people who are tinkerers at heart and things like that, but there is no formal association between those two. But it's an interesting thought. Yeah.
Thank you, Dr. Vivek, for your elaboration on that. The next 2 questions I see in the chat are, the first one is there any plan to have messaging systems across institutions similar to something like WhatsApp? And the second question is regarding, are there any security issues with the maturity of the Aadhaar ID usage? And maybe if you could elaborate a bit more on the cybersecurity ideas in general behind Aadhaar, that would be appreciated. Thank you.
Yeah. So I think that one of the things that is definitely happening, and this is not, I don't know whether to necessarily call it as explicitly part of India Stack or not. I think the API thinking has actually come into basically many departments in the government. About 10 years ago, this was something that was not the way by which people were actually communicating with each other, and various things in various departments were tended to be more in silos. But I see that across various ministries and other things, the API thinking is coming, where basically people are exposing the kinds of things that they have as APIs for use by other government departments through kind of an API method by which people can actually kind of provide more useful information through these interoperable APIs that exist between things. Regarding security of Aadhaar, I think that I would say this, that as far as Aadhaar is concerned, I think that the security standards that we do use are actually world class. But having said that, it is something that you have to at all times be vigilant about how systems like this people can attempt to try and subvert. That's something that we have to be vigilant at all times. But I think that if you look at the sophistication of the techniques that have been used in Aadhaar to actually ensure its security, I think it stands up to world-class scrutiny.
Thank you very much, Dr. Vivek, for the responses to the questions. At this moment, I don't see any new questions in the chat box. So Bindu, back to you.
Okay, thank you, Calvin. So if the audience have any questions whatsoever for the expert speakers, you may reach out to us later via email, and we will facilitate an interaction with the experts. We also have some handouts pertaining to this webinar and the series in general available for your reference. And I would now, if any of our the fellow speakers, if you have any questions from Dr. Raghavan, please feel free to ask the questions now.
Bindu, may I add something to one of the audience questions, if you permit?
Yes, Mr. Babu, please go ahead.
Yeah, thank you very much. There was one question about academia's participation in contributing for this stack for building the digital infrastructure. As Mr. Raghavan mentioned, this public digital infrastructure includes not only the platforms what he discussed. Yes, there are also infrastructure like 5G testbed, which has been made, being worked upon by the academia consortium to make it available for the industry as well as SMEs and startups. This is one of the initiative taken from Government of India by bringing academia's, premium academia together to build something called 5G testbed in hardware as well as virtual form. And there are efforts to make it available to all the industry, including startups and SMEs, so that they can work on individual subsystems, algorithm, as well as at the sub-module level. If there is any innovation to work on this 5G end-to-end ecosystem, apart from the network products, they can also come with a kind of fringe or edge applications to test on this infrastructure. This is also going to be made available, as part of the, Government of India's efforts in strengthening public digital infrastructure for services and also for the network products and equipment. This is the first response with regard to academia's participation. And the second thing is with regard to smart cities. There was also a mention about what kind of contribution or work is there on, stack point of view for smart cities. I may not be able to say exactly about is there any stack for smart city infrastructure, but I want to say that some of the concerns observed by the industry as well as stakeholders and users, as Mr. Raghavan pointed out, we want to keep it, open for more innovators, more, vendors to get in, so that there's no vendor locking for the products to protect long-term investment for smart city infrastructure. For which, what the Center for we have something called CDOT, Center for Development of Telematics, which is a Government of India R&D institution. It has recommended something called Common Service Platform. It's called it is something which comes as a mediation layer between northbound as well as southbound applications, so that whatever the IoT devices, applications they use, despite their heterogeneity, they mediate and convert into a what's called transparent platform to the northbound application, so that there may be change of proprietary protocols, there may be issues with regard to earlier investments in IoT devices, etc. Despite their heterogeneity, this common service layer will protect so that issues remain transparent with regard to higher layers and northbound applications. This is one of the smart city, what's called recommended architectural layer, which is going to take care of the smart city investments as well as smart city innovation. That is from my side, Bindu. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Babu, for pointing out, for showcasing the CDOT Common Services platform for smart cities. With this, I think since we do not have any more questions at this point of time for Dr. Raghavan, I think we can conclude this particular session. we are still in good time. We are 10 minutes ahead of time. So if it is fine with the next session speakers, we can jump right into the next session. Ms. Okuda, is it okay if we start the next session on the ITU and engagement models now?
Yes, ma'am, may I intervene? I'm sorry for that.
Yes, Asif.
Director General TDSI, Ms. Pamela Kumar has raised hand.
Okay, so can we make her enable her to speak?
Yes, sure.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Okuda, sorry for this.
I have unmuted you. Can you self-unmute yourself, ma'am? Then.
Thank you, Pamela Kumar here. So thanks, Dr. Vivek Raghavan, Madam Atsuka Okuda, and Dr. Shakya, Ms. Anita Praveen, Mr. Kishore Babu, and everybody for this excellent session, very, very insightful. So I had a specific question to Dr. Vivek Raghavan. Taking forward from what Kishore Babu has talked about the Common Services Platform, which is actually based on a globally harmonized standard called 1M2M, where TSDSI is one of the partners. And what we are doing right now is we are looking at application layer standards. We believe that, and as you have showcased, there are a lot of innovation in the application space is going on. And even the whole 5G and beyond is talking about the verticalization of technology, right? So the verticalization of the communication and ICT technology to build vertical specific. So we are actually working with IDRBT right now on 5G and beyond use cases in the financial. There's a use case lab which has been set up there. So it looks like a great opportunity to take this India stack learning and kind of build it into a globally harmonized standard to proliferate it to the next level. Is that something that makes sense to you? Is there something that we can do together to enable this?
So, ma'am, I think that there are, firstly, thank you for the question. I think that there are some efforts regarding globalization of India stack and actually taking it to other countries. And I think there are some activities, and certainly collaboration on some of those things would be very welcome, right? To do that, and I think that so I think, yeah, that's an excellent idea.
Okay, so we look forward to it, because as you can see that what has happened with the Common Services Platform, which is based on 1M2M, we have been able to now get it declared as a national standard. Mm-hmm. And now that it is a national standard, it is being mooted by DOT and all to the Smart City Mission and others to embrace it as a standard for any new IoT M2M kind of applications. So proliferation of what you've done with India Stack into other verticals, if we join hands, would be a dream come true for both of us.
Yes, no, definitely. I mean, I think every different domain has its own different issues. So I don't want to say, but I think some of the learnings that we have may be applicable in other domains as well.
Thank you very much. Yeah, over to you, Bindu.
Thank you, Pamela, for bringing out the very important aspect of standardization and taking India Stack as a global towards global standardization. We will now move into the next session for this webinar,